And hello, internet world. That's Socks right there. Socks, you want to say hi to the world? Say hi. No keyboard walking, remember? Okay, this video, not really a video I'd like to make, but you know, I'm going to make it because I think it's important. So, you know, I think that our country is gone. For many reasons, I think our country it's finished. You have the Trump administration that put a bump stock ban into place. You have Trump and his his AG or whatever, who has said, you know, both Trump and his person who was recently confirmed want red flag laws. Under the Reagan administration, laws were put into place that allow people to be, well, actually, the Reagan administration put, there's a hair right there, put gun control measures into place. You know, the Republicans are actually the worst when it comes to gun control, not the Democrats, believe it or not. But people keep voting for people they think are conservatives, thinking things are going to change. You know, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Keep voting the same way over and over again and expecting different results. Doesn't make any sense to me. But so you have Tucker Carlson, who has promoted collectivism, socialism. You have Tucker Carlson, who is encouraging Trump to do something about Google and YouTube and those people and Facebook because of their censorship of libertarians and conservatives. I don't support any censorship. I don't support any. You have the Republicans, including Trump, although Trump's actually a Democrat. I mean, if you actually look at his policies, Trump supports abortion. Right? Clear and simple. He supports abortion. He has said that more than once. Trump wants to raise the age for ownership of a firearm. So there are 3 strikes right there when it comes to gun control on Trump. There are certain words you're no longer allowed to say on YouTube. You will get your entire channel taken down for saying certain words. There are words that are part of the common language. You have Ben Shapiro, who supports gun control. Only certain people, according to him, should have guns. You have the GOP that claims to be pro-life, yet they, when the first 2 years of the Trump administration, the GOP held both houses of Congress and the White House, and all they did was talk about defunding Planned Parenthood. They were in a position to actually outlaw abortion, and they didn't do it. And this is not the first time. Was it, was that the 90s? What's that idiot's name? Oh gosh, I can't remember his name. And now he's on tour with conservative groups, 4 conservative groups. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. But, and Trump has talked about fake news, and it's not fake news, it's lies. Just, call it a lie. The problem with this is that there's going to be rules and regulations and legislation regulating speech. They're coming for our guns. Pure and simple. Trump has said this. There are videos of him saying this stuff. My stepson doesn't believe me. There are videos of him saying these things. And people keep voting, they think they're voting for something they're not voting for. It was in the 90s. I was brought up as in a Democratic Party household, and I was a staunch Democrat. I was a member of the Young Democrats in college. I was very active when I moved to the Texas Hill Country. I was active with the Democratic Party, and that stopped in the late 80s, early 90s, because I was like, wait a minute, I don't agree with all this BS. Yet, if you actually look at the GOP, they're not at all conservative anymore. I mean, they're not pro-life. They're, under Newt Gingrich, the Republicans were in a position to either stop or at least severely limit baby killing, and they didn't do it. And I remember Rush Limbaugh, somebody asked him on his radio show, I think he's still around too, somebody asked him about it, he said, increments. I'm like, no, you were in a position to stop, so you say you claim to believe in certain things, but the way you vote is totally against that. And I used to watch C-SPAN. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I used to watch C-SPAN and C-SPAN 2, C-SPAN 1, and then later C-SPAN 1 and 2. And I remember when there'd be legislation, say something that was getting a lot of coverage, a lot of media coverage, and there would be the vote would go down between party lines. But then I noticed, because I was watching C-SPAN, it wasn't something that I just glanced at from time to time. I was watching this, and I noticed that weeks or months later, they would go back and they would amend all the previous legislation, and both sides would get what they wanted. And that usually meant less freedom. People say, well, with the red flag laws, there's the removal of due process, which is true. But there are other laws that we have in effect that violate due process. And I don't hear people screaming about that. Hold on, hon. And that's my wife in there I'm talking to. When you have all these people that pretend to be conservatives that are not conservatives. I mean, Tucker Carlson has talked about censorship. Supporting censorship, and another thing. Do you know the United States has been buying oil from Venezuela all these years? We have not stopped purchasing oil from Venezuela. We just haven't. And a lot of people find that odd. I've seen videos where people are asked about, where people are told about Bernie Sanders being a millionaire, multi-millionaire, owning 3 or 4 different houses, and his supporters are shocked, and some of them refuse to believe it. And there are people who refuse to believe the truth. And I don't know what's going to happen. I'm scared because people like me and my wife, we under socialism are considered non-productive. So we either have to go to work or get sent to a camp eventually. And I'm very scared for this country. I'm very scared for what's about to happen. And people are going to split I see the same things happening in this country today that happened in Germany in the 20s and 30s, and that is scary as hell. I survived Franco. Okay, I survived Franco in Spain. We made it out. And now the same crap is happening here. It's crazy. I mean, there are a lot of points I could make, a lot of examples I could give. I knew of an incident. I remember having heard about it on the news, seen it on the news, and this girl that I once dated, her nephew and his friend, and they were punks. I mean, what happened to them honestly would have eventually happened to them anyway. But this off-duty SAPD detective and his son laid in wait, illegal, and shot both kids in the back. The cop got off scot-free. He got off scot-free. He wasn't even fired. He did get charged, but the jury said not guilty. And I see that too much, far too often. Excuse me. Texas has red flag laws now. A lot of states do, and they're trying to do that here in New Hampshire. I lived in Texas for 44 years. And I'm really scared. I'm really, really scared. I mean, I am scared. And I'm not in the best of health. Anybody who's watched some of my videos knows I'm not in the best of health. So, people talk about bugging out. Where in the hell are we going to go? And how are we going to do it? I don't think my wife would do it anyway. One thing I do want to get is a flintlock rifle. But I don't know if that's going to happen. And, I'm not saying it's time for people to panic, but it's time for people to really start thinking and to really examine what they really believe and to really pay attention to who they are voting for. I've had people argue with me saying, well, you have to vote GOP. You have to vote GOP. I'm like, why? Why am I going to vote for people who support gun control, censorship, and things like that? I'm not going to do that. No, I will vote for individuals. I only vote for individuals. I don't vote for people based on their party affiliation. I don't think there should be political parties. I think every candidate should run as an individual, not just on their words, but on their deeds. Like Trump has said, we will never get rid of the Second Amendment, but then he's supporting laws that violate the Second Amendment. What? Okay. Okay. So, and then Dinesh D'Souza, I saw, I guess it was billed as a debate, and he lied about somebody, and he did not correct himself. He was corrected, but he did not correct himself, and he was talking about a rather famous leftist who died a long time, not a long time ago, but some time ago. And he was saying, well, when he died, he was in $1 million house. Well, it wasn't his house. He was in somebody else's house. But D'Souza was trying to make it out as if it was his house, and it wasn't. I've known of all sorts of my mother was physically assaulted. She was black and blue in a nursing home. I reported it to the state. They said, we're not going to do anything. I was abused as a boy for what, 11 years, 10, 11 years, 10 years, off and on for 10 years. And I reported it. And I was told they weren't going to do anything. And you have people up here that call themselves liberty activists, yet they're pedophiles, or they support pedophiles. I know of someone who lives in this area who's involved with them, who was at the wedding for me and my first wife, my late wife. And he runs for office, and he calls himself a conservative. Sometimes he says the only conservative running for this office. Yet he participates in bisexual orgies with a guy who is a pedophile and who supports pedophilia. I mean, he openly supports pedophilia. He has a radio show, sadly. Not the guy who was at our wedding, but the guy he follows, because it's like a personality cult. But I see all this stuff on the left. Remember, the Nazis were socialists. Like it or not, they were socialists. Actually, I have a book over here that deals with that. Now, I was born a dual citizen, but when I turned 18, I lost my Spanish citizenship. I no longer have a passport, but I need to get one, and because I have no problems taking my current wife to Spain. I have no problems with that. I have no problems taking her to Ireland. You look at the media. I remember in the 80s and 90s and 2000s when things were going on in Ireland. And I remember watching the media, seeing hearing what they said and seeing what they showed, and I'm like, but that's not accurate. You're not telling the truth about what's going on. But the media lies. The media lies and lies and lies, and they don't stop. And people believe what they hear. Tim Pool has had a number of videos that deal with media lies. There's the Humble Libertarian, or Humble Libertarian, has a list of 100 things that Trump and Obama have done the same things with. He had 100 things about Obama, where Obama did the same things as Bush. And I'm scared. I'm very scared. My late wife and I, we moved here for more freedom. And it looks like that's a bust. It looks like that's a bust. The police here are good, decent folk. I mean, at least in our town. I know our police officers, and they're good, decent folk. But they're still police, and I would be very careful about anything I said to them. And I know of an officer down in Massachusetts. I know of him. I mean, I watch his channel, and I have no criticism of him. See, I could never be a cop. I actually applied to the SAPD. I didn't pass the test by 1 point. I could have retaken it after 6 months, but I didn't. But I could never be a cop, because there are things I would never arrest a person for. There are things I would never give a person a ticket for. And hey, there's no fighting here. Hey, that's a cat. Anyway, I just couldn't do it. And then, to be honest, Cops have a lot to deal with. They really do. They have a lot to deal with. And sometimes officers, they have to be psychologists, they have to be social workers, they have to deal with some really, really bad people. You know, there used to be a group of people up here in the 70s in our town who eventually went to prison down in Massachusetts. And I've known people here in our town, or I know people here in our town, who were harassed by this group of people. They had a particular nickname, I won't say what it was, but you know, and then from what I've seen online, I don't really pay attention to the TV, but you know, it's the boob tube, it's this nonsense. You know, actually somebody shared something earlier on some movie that came out, and people on the left are upset that it wasn't gay enough. Like, what does it matter? You know, and you know, all the speech. Look, speech laws, they exist. Okay, some states have passed them, some cities have passed them. Houston, Texas. I lived outside of Houston for 11 years, and I lived in what was essentially a small town. Now it's a part of Houston. Now it's crime-ridden. I wouldn't go there. I might go there during the day with somebody who knows that area today. But you know, I look at maps, satellite imagery mainly. I don't really like maps. I like satellite images. And geez, all those farms are gone. I mean, they are gone. The dirt roads are gone. The cotton gin, gone. There used to be a little airport near there, gone. You know, today people get put in jail and prison for all sorts of nonsense that, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, they would not have gone to jail for. They just would not have gone to jail. They wouldn't even have gotten a ticket. At the most, a cop might have talked to them. I remember the town that I just mentioned. You know, I didn't mention the name of it, but some of the kids, I was invited to do it, but I never did it. They would go climb on the school that was in our neighborhood, climb on the roof on the weekends. They weren't hurting nothing. You know, the sheriff's department, they might drive by, they'd see them. They didn't stop and say, get down from there. They knew they weren't hurting anything, so they left them alone. We used to go walking around that town in the middle of the in the middle of the night, and it was completely safe. Now it's dangerous during the day, and even more dangerous at night. So you have all these socialists that call themselves conservatives, like Trump, Tucker Carlson, probably D'Souza, but you know, D'Souza lied. He told an outright lie, and he knew it was a lie. And when he was corrected, he did not acknowledge that. He could have said, "Oh well, I'm sorry, I made a mistake." Well, you know, I make mistakes. Hopefully, I acknowledge my mistakes. But you know, for people who are all into bugging in or bugging out, you might want to think about that. First of all, a lot of you are supporting these people that I'm talking about, like Trump. You know, if there's an article where Trump was interviewed and they said, "Are you more of a Democrat or a Republican?" He said, "More of a Democrat," because he's pro-abortion, he's anti-Second Amendment, and you have all these Republicans that have lined up and voted for gun control. You know, look at Venezuela today. What's going on there right now? Actually, I wanted to look that up, see what the latest news was. But I can find a halfway reliable source. Can't find reliable sources anymore. You know, CNN definitely is not reliable. They lie through their teeth. But you know, once they lie, people hear it. They don't hear the correction or retraction. They just hear the lie and believe it's true. The Mueller report is an example. Now, you know, I made a video about that. You know, how now the left is you know, all into conspiracy theories. You know, people don't seem to remember that Trump and the Clintons have been longtime friends, very good longtime friends. You know, and I don't care what a politician says, it's what they do. I could care less what somebody says. If they do something the opposite of what they say, then they're lying. And you know, so you know, you have the mainstream media now with shows, TV shows, talking about nonsense, claiming that there's all sorts of, and politicians are doing this in front of crowds, that, you know, blacks are being targeted when they're not being targeted. There are studies that show cops, black or white, are more likely to shoot a white person than a black person because they're scared to death of being called a racist and, you know, riots and stuff like that, and it shouldn't be that way. You have the left calling, you know, I don't like Ben Shapiro, but you have people on the left who call Ben Shapiro an anti-Semite, yet it's the left at their rallies that are spouting anti-Semitism. One guy that I do still kind of like, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's gay. He's married to a guy, and people call him homophobic. You're calling a gay person, a gay guy who's married to a guy, a homophobe. That's ridiculous. Just ridiculous. So, you know, and how, you know, there were things Obama said about killing people, bombing people, and he laughed about it, yet the left is like, well, that's okay. But if somebody that they don't like says it, then all of a sudden the world's going to end. Did you know that the Nazis were one of the first group of people that had a so-called war on cancer, a war on tobacco? Hitler hated tobacco. And it's the left who were doing the same thing. The Nazis were environmentalists. A lot of people don't realize it. The Nazis were environmentalists. Some of the, you know, earliest environmentalists, I guess you could say, they were laws. And we're going down a bad road, a very, very scary road. And I don't think this country is going to survive. I know it's not going to survive. I know it's not going to survive. Period.